93, 93, 93. Alright, welcome to the live stream. This is Aman Asharanu. We back in here. I'm going to play a little intro music and we'll get straight to the video to see what spiritual path will be best to undertake in 2022. So I'm going to play the theme music and we'll be right back. Alright, let's see what we got here. Let me go ahead and pause this, play this.
You know my city atomic, we radiate them comets. Make the lyrics go supersonic. Shift to the earth, call it plate tectonics. Whoa, beat so astronomic. Yo, trying to grow hydroponic. Doph, trance, call it nirvanic dose. Griffin and serpent typhonic coast. Deja vu, vu. Watch as I cast his juju. King of the heavens, call me Anu. Started with the demons like Rahu. Spear to the left, issues. Journey to the planet Nibiru. That conjure man, hoodoo. Clone nigga two like Mewtwo. Deja vu, 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 deja, 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 deja vu, vu. Watch as I cast his juju. King of the heavens, call me Anu. Started with the demons like Rahu. Spear to the left, issues. Journey to the planet Nibiru. That conjure man, hoodoo. Clone nigga two like Mewtwo. The bar wound from the tomb. All this darkness I consume. Interference can call on Zoom. Design of mine, I am canoe. Working them scales, holy as hell. I repel, psychic spells. Ringing them bells, throwing them shells. It's clip-offic where I dwell. The bar wound from the tomb. All this darkness I consume. Interference can call on Zoom. Interference can call on Zoom. Design of mine, I am canoe. Working them scales, holy as hell. I repel, psychic spells. Ringing them bells, throwing them shells. It's clip-offic where I dwell. Wearing that ring of the genie. Surrounded in cloaks, you can't see thee. That 93, my philosophy. That 93, my philosophy. That 93, my philosophy. That 93, my philosophy. That 93, that 93, that 93, that 93, that 93, my philosophy. Them in the stars of geography. I'm invoking them sacred names. Level my mental, reversing planes. Infamous, fuck all that clout and fame. The Kiyama, I set the whole world aflame. Captain Soul, I transcend with my energy. Noah's Ark and I speak metaphysically. Underworld, you know who that ruler be. Hello Cyrus, I resurrect sexually. Others listen, the chosen receive it. That's because their true soul is vampiric. Way before Vedic, Druidic. Look at that, that's satiric. Pray to holy creams like the Sufis. Grab the pin, I'm scribing on loose sleeves. As I chief, I advance in the far deep. Call the spirits that rose from the concrete. Christ heard it through like a Gnostic. Lay my true eyes on the prophets. Don't separate, we composite. Aeon of the Gothic. Aeon of the Gothic. Aeon of the Gothic. The demisphere, I illuminate. That scholarship, I sophisticate. I step foot towards a middle gate. I alternate between conscious states. Found victory while in the Zack. Couple magic swords, put some druid hats. That holy cat with the candle axe. The myth, the back, hidden in our rap. The bar wound from the tomb. All this darkness I consume. Interference can call on Zoom. Design of mine, I am canoe. Working them scales, holy as hell. I repel, psychic spells. Ringing them bells, throwing them shells. It's clip-offic where I dwell. Deja vu, well, deja vu, vu. Watch as I cast his juju. King of the heavens, call me Anu. Started with the demons like Rahu. Spear to the left, issues. Journey to the planet Nibiru. That conjure man, hoodoo. 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 That conjure man, hoodoo.
So hopefully everybody is good to the best you can be in these intense times. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that L fresh as hell. Now that you mention it, I wasn't even thinking about that. I should play the L. Okay, yeah, I'll play that at the end. I'll play the L fresh as hell at the end. Wasn't even thinking about that. I appreciate that, Tech Mans. I see you, Non-Ether. What's up, Jay? Glow Green. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. So we're going to get straight into it. So what I'm going to do just like yesterday. I will pull a card. I will pull a tarot card. So instead of me just giving my own personal opinion, what I feel may be the best way, I'm going to allow the tarot to speak. Let me turn this down a little bit, just in case it's kind of distracting. All right. So as I said, I'll go ahead and draw a tarot card, then add my analysis after the fact instead of before the fact. So I'll give my input on whatever card comes up. So we're not going to do a series or anything. I mean, if we need extra information, we may pull an extra card, but we'll see what comes up. So we'll mainly focus around one card and see what's going on with that and see what's going on. So I'm going to shuffle the deck right now and we'll get straight to it. So the card that arises is the Prince of Wands. So when it comes to the Prince of Wands, actually let me go ahead and find an image of this so I can put it on the screen. I'll make it even simpler. So give me a second. I'm going to put the image on the screen so everyone can see what I see. So give me 1 second here. Okay, so as I'm pulling this up, I just want to make sure I'm putting the right settings on. I'll speak a little bit about it. So when we are speaking about the Prince of Wands, we're dealing with the air of the fire. because we're dealing with the suit of wands. And whenever we are dealing with the suit of wands, and there was a lot of wands that occurred, especially in yesterday's reading, a lot of wands came up. So we are continuing with this energy of the wands, which connects us to our archetypal self or our archetypal image. What's up, Rashad? Yes, mostly when it comes to the tarot, I try to be as intuitive as I can. And that's so pretty much I try to be a clean slate when it comes to the tarot. And that's why I allowed the tarot to guide. Instead of me utilizing my conscious mind or my logical mind, of course, I can come up with a reason why I feel this is better or that is better. But I allow myself to be empty, then allow the tarot to dictate the pace, which is the goal as to why you would use a tool like the tarot. You're not utilizing the tarot to add on to what you already know, per se. You look towards the tarot for guidance so that you can step out of the way. And that's the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The tarot allows us to communicate with that subconscious so that we can release our thoughts, because you must release your thoughts in order to enter nirvana. Nirvana is a thoughtless state. So in order for us to get to a state of thoughtlessness, we have to move our thoughts out of the way. So when it comes to the tarot allows us to do just that, to move our thoughts out the way, because our thoughts will be based on the cards that arise and not what we personally think or our personal opinion. So as the Prince of Wands has just arise, that's not based on my personal opinion. The only thing I did was shuffle the cards. So now that the Princess came up, now I can add on my analysis after the fact. So I'm allowing my subconscious to be in the front and the conscious mind to back up whatever the subconscious is speaking about, instead of doing it in reverse, because we're used to having the conscious mind in front, then the subconscious mind in the back. So all I'm doing is reversing it. And again, this is why we would use any type of spiritual tool to reverse this process, because when we allow the subconscious to dictate the pace and we remove our thoughts about it or our feelings about it, because again, I have no personal thoughts or feelings towards the cards that were drawn. I just simply must interpret what arised. And this is especially true when you do tarot readings for other people. The last thing you want to do is to allow your personal influence or your personal opinion to dictate what is being said. So whenever I do readings for others, the goal is to allow the cards to dictate where the thoughts go, instead of me trying to figure out, okay, well, what would be the best thing for them to do, or how should they deal with the situation. So instead of me trying to utilize my own thought power to solve the problems, we allow the tarot to think, and all we do is reflect the imagery. So all I'm simply doing is reflecting the imagery of the Prince of Wands at this moment, and just doing my best to seek understanding as to why the card arised. So instead of me thinking about what the card means per se, it's more so, okay, well, what does this how do I connect the dots? It's a bunch of scattered pieces. Because remember, the tarot is just a bunch of imagery, it's a bunch of symbolism. So we have to make some type of sense of the symbolisms, which, okay, let me go ahead and put the image in front of us so we can all see the symbolisms. So give me a second here. Finally, there we go. So I just simply did a Google search and just pulled the card up. So this is what we see in front of us. So if we study the Prince of Wands, just simply looking at the imagery itself, we see a chariot being pulled by a lion. The chariot of fire, as we would say. So most of us will probably be already familiar with what we would call the Merkaba, which would be the chariot card. So, if we have been doing our spiritual studies, we should already have an understanding of what a Merkaba is or what the Merkaba means. So if we take it a step further, looking at this Prince of Wands, we see the Prince of Wands holds the scepter of power in one hand. So yes, that's in his right hand, he is holding a scepter of power. And in his left hand, you see that his hand is opened and he has the chariot guided by his wrist. Let me see if I can zoom in a little closer. So if we look at the left hand, you see the left hand is not guiding the chariot whatsoever, as it's thrown around his wrist. So just as I was speaking about earlier, where we allow the intuition to lead the way, or we allow our subconscious to lead, this is what we see demonstrated as he's using the left hand, or the feminine hand, the negatively charged hand, to guide the chariot. And not even with the hand itself, but the wrist. What we actually do see in his hand is the scepter of power in his right hand. He is actually grabbing that with his actual fingers, with the actual hand. But he's only utilizing the wrist when it comes to the chariot. So the question arises, why is that? This reflects a level of trust that we have, you can say, lost with the animals of the wild. Most people will go into, you can say, a lion's den and be afraid for their lives. But there is some connection within us as human beings in the animal kingdom that is a level or intimate level of trust. See, what we see depicted in zoos today, because the only time we see like tame lions is in zoos, which we know is absolutely ridiculous. Peace, Kelly. All praise is due to the Great Mother. As always, 93, 93, 93. So the only time we see a tamed lion is in the zoo with a bunch of bars, a bunch of chains. Is basically, we're looking at a slave. We just call it what it is. However, We know in ancient times or ancient thought, because I don't want to say ancient times, it's just a way of thinking. When it comes to ancient thought or natural thought, we are not enemies of the wild. We actually have an intimate connection in which animals allow us to learn from them, which is how things like martial arts was developed. We were allowed to be amongst the lions, the bears, the tigers, so on and so forth. We were allowed to be amongst them, which is where the whole shape-shifting thing comes from, with our ability to shape-shift into animals. This is what shamans do, the shapeshifters, shape-shifting into wolves, so on and so forth. Where does all that come from? So we see this trying to open up the doors for us to realize that we have a connection with, we can say, the primitive self that is veiled. It's there, but it's unconscious. It's sleeping. But it's so real that basically what the image is depicting is we can effortlessly engage with the animal kingdom or animal totems, because now we call it animal totems. By wielding the scepter of power in the right hand. We also see a seal at the chest area. This is also a certain stance. So let me zoom out a bit so we can see the full stance. This is also a ancient stance. So he's not just in this posture or position for no reason. So let me zoom out a little bit. So if we see this stance, this is a stance that generates, or a posture that generates a certain currency in the body. So if the Prince of Wands is the air element within the fire, and we understand the air would represent intelligence, communications. So obviously there's some type of invisible communication going on between the human and the animal. We also see this in Avatar. For anybody who's seen the Avatar movie, and I'm sure everybody has, you'd see the same thing. You see this invisible communication being established when they are plugged in, when they are connected as one. So essentially you can say they are one. There is no separation between the human being and the animal at this point. There is no separation. So let me zoom in. Let me zoom all the way out so we can see the line as well. So they are operating as one unit or one force through an invisible line of communication. So this invisible line of communication is allowing them to navigate through portals, because the air also represents portals. The ability to, because this is a purpose that the lion serves, or the animal totem, the animal spirit. Remember, animals are portals into different dimensions. So that's why we always saw the witches and the warlocks. They always had animals, cats or otherwise. They always had some type of animal because they serve as vessels into the other world, because they are intimately connected to that other world. So we use them as vessels or mediums, that may be a better word. We use the animal kingdom as mediums to tap into the world that they know very intimately, that we're trying to understand. So the Prince of Wands will represent that initiation, because remember, this is the prince. So before the prince becomes the knight or the king, the prince is going through the initiation. And that's why you see on the king or the knight of wands, it depicts a horse. So the prince evolves from the chariot and goes directly into the animal kingdom. Because you see, the prince is on a chariot. The prince is not mounted on top of the lion, because you can see the lion is really a cub. This is not a fully grown lion, just like you can say that's not necessarily a fully grown man. So you can say they are going through a process of initiation to learn how to bind together. They are both going through initiation. So you can say the initiation in this case requires you to raise a young lion from a cub. Just think about that. Because if you raise a lion from a cub, it has an intimate connection with you. It's not going to behave like lions that don't know you. So even though the lion is absolutely dangerous, if you raise him to be civilized, or her, if you raise a lion, whether him or her, to be civilized, you don't even need to control it. And this is what we see depicted in this card. There is no need to pull a lion like you see people pulling their dogs, or people pulling, sometimes, the animal fights against them. They're not always cooperating with you because they have their own intelligence. But in this case, we see that there's no need for the being to guide the animal spirit. There is no need. Why? Because he raised, or she raised, it from a cub. So even though the lion is highly volatile, if it is raised with the proper instruction, then even something that is absolutely dangerous can become absolutely constructive or absolutely beautiful, allow you to go through portals you couldn't access. So instead of the lion trying to kill you or eat you, which would be the normal response, now this lion knows how to take you into higher worlds. In this case, it is an archetypal world, because we're dealing with the suit of wands. So this particular lion has access to the archetypal world. So the lion serves as a portal, because the lion is a symbol or a reflection of that archetypal world. That's why when we observe lions, you learn, because they are reflecting that archetypal essence naturally. We as humans or spiritual beings, being able to reflect anything we desire, we study so that we learn. And when we learn, you can say the secret code of a thing. When we study a thing and learn the secret code of a thing, we can shape shift into the thing. And that's where shape shifting comes from. If you know the secret code of anything, you can turn or manipulate that thing. So if we contain everything within us that's in the universe, there is a code that allows you to shape shift. Because why would you not be able to shape shift if you are the miniature universe, and the universe is shape shifting all the time? We're having changes within the body and cycles within the body all the time. But there are quick cycles or fast cycles, then there are slower cycles. So if we are talking about slower cycles, you can say, that's a person aging. When a person ages, you can say that's a slow cycle, that's a slow process. But if we're talking about a quickening or a spiritual awakening, this is what the lion is representing. The lion is representing that spiritual quickening or that spiritual awakening by tapping you into the archetypal plane without any, you can say, direction of yourself. You see, the spiritual being is not directing the chariot. The chariot already knows where to go. The lion already knows where to go, because they are intimately connected. They are synchronized. So he or she does not require to give the animal totem the animal spirit direction, because there is a invisible line of communication. And again, this is why the Prince of Wands is the heir of fire. So the Prince of Wands has established that invisible line of communication that allows the animal spirit to know exactly what to do and where to go without words being spoken or without you having to direct with your hand. So this goes back to the original question of, well, what is the best spiritual path to take in 2022? As we begin to decode the symbolisms of this card. So we already understand that we're dealing with the wands. So we're dealing with the archetypal plane. So we're talking about the archetypal plane. The fire. So whatever you subscribe to, it should be rooted in the fire element. That's the first thing to understand. The first thing to understand is you must be rooted in the fire element, or the archetypal plane, whatever you would like to call it. If we are speaking about the 7 forbidden arts, this is pyromancy. So the best spiritual path will be a path that allows you to practice your pyromancy. Pyromancy is a forbidden art for a reason. See, pyromancy is the next level up from, you can say, candle magic or fire magic. So when most people think about fire magic, they think about lighting candles and, and doing rituals. That's what most people are familiar with. So pyromancy is taking that a step up. Pyromancy is you are actually manipulating the fire itself. So instead of lighting the fire in the candle, it's still contained within a candle. So if you are manipulating the flame itself, meaning you can get the flame to become bigger or smaller, you're not just observing the fire. You are manipulating the essence of the fire itself. Why can you manipulate the essence of the fire itself? Because we ourselves contain the same fire that we are manipulating, because we have all 4 elements within us. We are fire, water, air, and earth. So all we are simply doing is tapping into the fire essence that we already contain. So when we can tap into this fire essence that we already contain, it manipulates the fire outside of us as well. And that's why people you can say walk through fire, or we can say, let me use another example of like people walking over hot coal. Maybe everybody hasn't seen that, but it's clearly on YouTube. Just type in walking on hot coal. How can people walk on hot coal? You see it, it's like a sport. People walking on hot coal, it's a sport. How can they do that? Because they are manipulating the fire within themselves. It's not that they can just take fire that other people can't take. Because you can say that if a normal person steps on those rocks, their feet will burn. So how is it that the normal person, if they step on these same rocks or these same coals and they will get burned, how is it that someone can train themselves to not get burned by higher temperatures? How is that possible? Just think about it. So let's take time to really reflect on what's going on here. So we are talking about tapping into the essence of fire itself. So now we're not just thinking about candles. We're not just thinking about, okay, let me put an intention on a candle. Let me focus on the candle and get into alpha brainwave states. If we're talking about pyromancy, once again, we're talking about being able to manipulate your own fires, your own archetypal essence physically. Now you can have some type of physical results. Now you can endure levels of fire that other people cannot endure. That is possible, not because it's you can say something magical, that somebody is doing something magical. It's just that they are tapping into elemental forces, or as we would like to call earth magic. This will be an example of earth magic. Earth magic is you tapping into your own elemental forces. And this is why people work with elementals. This is you learning the arts of manipulation of earth magic, which has a secret code like anything else. So going back to again the actual question, what would be the best spiritual path? A path that allows you to master pyromancy, a path that allows you to manipulate your own spiritual currency, that allows you to endure higher levels of heat or fire. Because fire also will go into electricity. So once we bring it into the realm of electricity, now we're going into the realm of technology. Because remember, the prince is also the air element, and we know the air element represents electricity, because electricity is ruled by Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign. So we are talking about the air, we're talking about technology. So we are combining air with fire. That will be the equivalent to combining technology with spirit, which will make technology spiritualized, to spiritualize technology, which then goes into technomancy, which I'm always talking about. So before you enter into technomancy, your introduction into technomancy becomes pyromancy, because your ability to master, you can say, pyromancy will allow you to raise, you can say, a young lion. And again, I'm not saying that you have to do this physically. You can do this in the spirit realm, because again, this is the purpose of working with elementals. So again, this is not to say go out and buy an actual cub. This is about working with the fire elementals, which dragons are one of them. So that chariot again represents a portal. So if you have a animal spirit, you can say, on the other side, they serve as the portal for you to access that other side, and you would then interact with them like you would interact with any other animal. They just don't have a physical shell, or you have to give them a physical shell. So you're either giving them a physical shell or they don't have one, but obviously you have a spiritual connection with it because you have opened up those portals to the fire elementals. So again, all this is ancient, all this is old, this is nothing new. We're just learning, okay, well, what direction or what do we need to activate that is lying dormant within us? So I think we've made our point here. I pretty much feel that the question has been answered. Again, we're just doing some pondering, just allowing myself to, as I'm speaking, that's another thing about utilizing the tarot, because as I'm speaking about it, I'm also learning as I'm speaking about it as well, because again, I didn't have any premeditated thought. So this is allowing me to learn as I'm speaking as well. So it creates a whole different experience, as opposed to, again, I just had some premeditated thoughts. So I'm learning as everyone else is learning simultaneously. So this becomes a collective thing instead of me directing based on my own personal experiences. So definitely take this, utilize it. You know what I mean? Master your thelema, because thelema just represents your true will. And thelema represents fire. So again, I didn't want to just directly say thelema, because again, that would be a little bit too personal. But this is the purpose of thelema. It is the fires of the will, because the will is the fire. We understand the will is Mars. So we're talking about your true will. We're talking about tapping into the spiritual essence of Mars, because Mars is already your will. But how do you spiritualize your will? You go through the gateways of thelema, or in this case, shamanism. Through the gates of shamanism, so that you are able to tap into the animal kingdom and open up those portals to the fire elementals and get those secret codes that allows you to master things like pyromancy, again, which is a forbidden art for a reason. So it's up to you to figure out why it is forbidden by taking steps towards it. It's like, okay, I see why most people shouldn't have access to this, because you got to be more responsible. So if you consider yourself spiritual, that means you are more responsible than everyone else, because you can contain powers that other people can't contain without losing themselves. So if you are spiritualized, that means you should be able to contain the forbidden arts. So it ain't forbidden to keep you out of it. It's forbidden for the masses to stay away from it, and for people like you to understand the secrets and use them responsibly. So with that, I bear peace. 93, 93, 93.